This tutorial, we're going to learn how to use the PlaySkript system in order to create some animations. And in particular, we're going to be focusing on data structure manipulations. And we're going to show how you can, starting from code that performs the data structure manipulation, we can create an animation for it. So first, the starting point for most PlaySkript projects is going to be that you're going to drop some things into the canvas. For example, here we can drop a text box that says, "Welcome to the linked list tutorial." And the moment I click, I can now see here the code that produces this text. And in fact, I can now go in here to the live edit button. And once I am in live edit mode, I can actually move this text around and even change some of its attributes. And that's going to automatically change the code here. So now let's start with the data structure manipulation. The first thing we're going to do is create a function to create nodes. So in this case, what we have is each node has a value and a next pointer, which initially starts out as undefined. And then we can create another function for insert. And the insert function is going to take an initial root node and a value. And we're going to start with a pretty simple function. So we have n initially equal to the root. And then while n is not undefined, n equals n dot next. And we're going to track also the last n so that after the list, we have a pointer to the last node n that was not undefined. And so now I can say that the last node n dot next is actually equal to a new node with the value val. And so if I do this, I can start with a list that has a node 5, and then I can insert a new node, for example, a node with value 10, another node with the value 15, and another node with the value 20. Let's add even one more node just to have some fun. So when I run this code, nothing happens. Well, it's actually constructing a data structure, but we can't see anything really. But now, here's where it gets more interesting. In here, for example, when I allocate a node, I can also draw a shape into the screen. So in this case, the shape is going to be a rectangle with rounded corners, just to make it a little prettier. And so we can go ahead and actually assign a variable to this rectangle. So I'm just going to call it shape0. And as part of the node data structure, I can say that the shape is going to be equal to shape0. And here, right-clicking on the rectangle, I can see some of the other attributes I can add. And one of those attributes you see is text. So I can actually say that the text that this is going to have is just going to be the value val. And so now you can see very quickly these numbers appear. And in fact, I can put here a wait and checkpoint so that every time it gets to this point, execution is going to pause until I right-click, and then it's going to move forward. And if I move back, then I'm actually going to be able to step back. So here I can see it starts at 5, and then 10, and then 15. And by left-clicking, I can go back to 10, and then 5. And by right-clicking, I can keep advancing and see all the nodes that get inserted. Except they're all showing up with the exact same coordinates. So one thing we can do is extend this interface so that now it receives x and y coordinates. So instead of these fixed coordinates, it's now going to be x and y. And I can go here, let's say this is going to be 10, 10, and maybe this one is going to be initially at 20, 20. So now you can see that the 5 shows up here, and then everything else shows up down here. But that's not exactly what I want. What I would like is for these nodes to show to the right of the previous node. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a new variable. Let's call it current node to store this. So this is now going to be the current node. And we're also going to create some variables. So notice that this cur_n is this kind of data structure, but what I actually want is a variable pointing to just the shape. So I can actually go in and say, hey, the last shape is equal to last n dot sh. And so now, instead of this 2020, what I want is I want to get the x coordinate of this last shape and the y coordinate of this last shape. And in fact, I want the x coordinate maybe 10 plus the x coordinate. So now what I see is that everything shows up to the right of the previous thing. And not only that, I can go back here to my live edit functionality and move everything around, and everything moves together, so that now I have better control over the position of these things. Another thing I can do is I can draw an arrow. Every time I add a new node, I want that node to have an arrow from here to here. Now, right now you can see all the arrows are showing up in the same place, but when I right-click on the coordinates, PlaySkript actually suggests some expressions for these coordinates. So in this case, it says, hey, this getX could have been just the third attachment of the shape in last sh. Notice that in order for that to happen, I had to have this variable last sh that actually points to the shape. It won't automatically go and find out that you can get this by looking at this field. But that's okay, that's what we did. Similarly here, instead of height and width, if I right-click here, it suggests that maybe what I want are different coordinates. Now here, it's only suggesting things in terms of last sh, but what I want to have here is I want to have also the current sh, which is current n dot sh. And so now when I go here, I get suggested coordinates in terms of cur sh. And in this case, we have attachment point 7. The way these attachment points are numbered is 0 is in the middle, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you want to learn more about these things, you can actually check out the documentation. So right here, this button shows you documentation for individual commands, and also has a little programming tutorial, so you can learn more about the language. So now, going back to this, what happens when we run? Well, every time something gets inserted, it gets inserted with a little arrow here. If I want to change the color of the arrow, I can go here and I can pick, for example, a black arrow, so that now there's this black arrow. Or I can go back to the dark green arrow. I can also go and live edit some properties of this arrow. For example, if I want it to be more pointy, or if I want it to be bigger or shorter. And so here you can see how at every step of the process I get to see new things getting inserted. I could even, for example, inside this loop, show how we are traversing the list. For example, one thing I can do is I can say, hey, right here at the beginning, let's draw an arrow. And let's give this arrow a name. We're just going to call it arrow. And at the very end, we want this arrow to go away. But in the meantime, as we move through the list, what we want is we want the arrow to always point to the same position. So what we're going to do is we're going to say move to, and we're going to move this arrow. And where are we going to move it to? Well, we can move it to the get x and the get y coordinates of this node. What are the coordinates of this node? Well, this node is n.sh, and here we have also n.sh. And so now what happens is after every step, we can see how it travels through all the nodes. Now, we don't want to show up here. We want to put some offsets here. So we can say this is an offset of, let's start with just some arbitrary values. Right, it's 10. And so what we see is it shows up all the way down here. But that's not where we want it. But we can actually move it to where we do want it. And you can see how those offsets got updated. And so now, at every step, we can see how the arrow moves through the whole thing. And so with this simple tutorial, hopefully you get a sense of how you can turn some code that performs some data structure manipulation and turn it into an animation illustrating said manipulation. You can even add more weight and checkpoints here so that you get a better idea of what's going on, so that at every step you can see the arrow moving. So this is the end. Thanks a lot.